I wanted to give my thoughts on the passing of Sid Eudy, Sid Vicious, Sycho Sid Justice. I did a video about Kevin Sullivan when he passed away. I don't know if I'm going to do videos on every wrestler that passes away. I don't really do obituaries too much on here. I've done a couple. I've talked about like Richard Donner in the past, and but I thought I was compelled to talk about Sid because with Kevin Sullivan, like his his peak time as a wrestler was before I started watching. With Sid, I can't say I saw his entire career because his run as Lord Humongous and his early Horseman run, I didn't see. I was too young. But I did catch him when he came to the WWF as Sid Justice. I saw a little bit of that when I was a kid. And then I got acquainted with him as Shawn Michaels' bodyguard when he would return in 1995. And then, of course, in 96, he had that sort of big run where he would beat Shawn Michaels for the world title at Survivor Series 1996 in the Garden, then drop it back to Shawn in January at the Royal Rumble in San Antonio. And I remember when the crowd in the Garden was cheering for Sid to win. That's one of the early times that I can remember as a kid that I saw a live show where the fans booed the good guy. That was not a normal thing back in 1996. And to be honest, it really wasn't a normal thing even after 96. It didn't really become normal probably until the Cena era, although there have been other time periods in the past where babyfaces have been booed or at least not liked. Ron Garvin's NWA run is one, but I want to talk about Sid. So here's a guy who was never going to win any awards for being the most athletic wrestler. He wasn't a guy who I would consider a tippy top in ring mechanic. You understand what I'm saying? He's not Mr. Perfect. He's not Bret the Hitman Hart. He's not Will Ospreay. He's not one of those kind of guys. Ricochet. Even like a Cody. He was a guy who understood. He had a great look. Giant of a man. Completely jacked. And he actually looked like a psycho. And he would play the character up, especially in WWF, as being a psycho. He would do the laugh. He would call himself the master and ruler of the world. He would do these really creative promos where he would laugh and then stop himself and go from talking very low, very low to screaming, and then back down to being low again. Just great stuff. I mean, he's a guy who understood the character side of being a pro wrestler. He's all character. People who came up in the current era where people, match quality, a lot of fans care a lot about that, especially a lot of the newsletter readers. It's all about like the in-ring athletic product. Sid was never that. Sid was a character. But man, he was memorable. People remembered Sid. His face, his little Jerry curl like mullet thing he had. He had the largest shoulders. I mean, I remember in 91 at SummerSlam when he's doing the end of the night. Well, it wasn't really the end of the night because they had the wedding to go to, but after the match made in hell, him and Hulk Hogan are in the ring doing the Hogan must pose, and Sid had shoulders bigger than Hogan. I mean, this man was an absolute monster. The master of the power bomb with Vader. And he's a guy who I always wanted to see come back and get honored in the Hall of Fame, but we never saw that. We never saw him get honored in the Hall of Fame, at least while he was alive. Maybe now that he passed away, they might. But he's a guy that, despite him never winning any Observer Awards for Best Wrestler, he was a character. He was a memorable guy because when he talked, he looked right at the screen, and he was a badass. You know, it's like Goldberg. Goldberg was all about presence and being a badass, and they kept him limited to sort of hide the fact that he really wasn't attuned at having long matches. You know, and Sid has had good matches. This idea of Sid being horrible, I've never liked that because I came up from an era where you had guys like that who just, you had your smaller guys having your technical masterpieces. Then you had the big guys that were just giants that would make the kids in the crowd like look at them and all. And Sid was more in that category. He was a family man, from what I understand, and he's a guy who people from my generation certainly will remember him. I'm not so sure how well the young fans will because he hasn't done much. You know, I think a big moment in his career, unfortunately, is when he broke his leg at the WCW Sin pay-per-view in January of '01. He snapped his leg, compound fracture, and it was the first time I had ever seen anything like that. They aired footage of his leg snapping on Nitro, and that was just totally disgusting. To this day, it's bad. And a lot of folks, they remember that. One of the most gruesome injuries ever. He was able to bounce back from that and walk again, and he did make a couple of appearances after that, but surprisingly, he wasn't one of those guys like Hacksaw Jim Duggan or like Sergeant Slaughter or like Mae Young for a time, who would always come back for like the historic episodes of Raw and stuff like that. That wasn't him. But he was memorable, and he's a guy who is definitely a guy who will be remembered. Definitely from my generation. So, rest in peace. That's all I have to say about it on this video.